This book was my mother's. She was a kindergarten teacher and used to read this to her kindergarten children. She used to bring it home for me to read. I thought it was kind of funny. The Pilgrim Party, a really, truly story by Sadyebeth and Anson Lowitz. It's a very old book. It was copyrighted 1931. Here is a real story about real people who lived a long time before your mother, your grandmother, or even your great-grandmother. They were called pilgrims. This is how they were dressed. There were father pilgrims and mother pilgrims, little boy and girl pilgrims, pilgrim dogs and cats. I would ask my mom, where are the dogs and cats? I guess they weren't in the picture. They lived in a town with a funny name. It was called Scrooby. Other towns in England had prettier names than Scrooby, but the pilgrims liked it best. Little cottages there. The pilgrims were terribly good. On Sunday, they always went to church, whether it rained or not. Looks like they're walking in puddles. They must be walking in the rain, huh? Pilgrims, whether it rained or not. Turn the page. But where their church was, no one knew. Not even the king's soldiers could find out. They looked in the woods. They looked in the cellars. That's a cellar there. And they looked in the attics. For King James had said that everyone must go to his church. He was a frightfully selfish man. Look at him with his crown and his nose in the air. King James. When the pilgrims would not mind him, the king sent his soldiers to Scrooby. They took the pilgrims away to a dark, gloomy dungeon. Poor pilgrims. There's a soldier with an axe. And there's the poor pilgrim. Then, there the poor pilgrims were most uncomfortable, for the king's dungeon was cold and damp. Their only visitors were the big gray rats who came to eat and sleep with them. Look at his feet. There's a lock. They locked his feet so he couldn't walk or run away. I don't know. I don't think I would want to go to a prison with cold, dark, and rats and feet locks. After several weeks, when the king thought the pilgrims had been punished enough, he let them all go home. To Scrooby, yay! Then the pilgrims decided to run away to Holland. So they sold their farms, they sold their horses, they sold their furniture, and their cows and chickens. This sign says, farm for sale. There's a pig and chickens and ducks, a cow. The cows were very sad. Look, he's crying. Pilgrims' mothers packed clothing with few other things in the great big trunks. The children helped. See the child bringing her things to put into the trunk? The next dark night, Pilgrim fathers dragged the heavy trunks to the seashore. There a boat waited, which carried the pilgrims to Holland. Go on a boat to Holland. Holland was not at all like Scrooby. Wooden shoes went clickety-clack, clickety-clack. Windmills whirred and whirred as round them the wind blew. Storks looked down from their nests in the chimney tops, and hundreds of tulips covered the ground. See the stork in his nest? Her nest, I guess. Dutch fathers and mothers, Dutch boys and girls, Dutch cows and chickens all lived together in little brick houses built on legs like pianos. Look, they don't have a front yard. There's water there. See the boat? You can ask your mommy why they had to have houses on legs. Soon the Pilgrims were settled in their own little Dutch homes. Fathers worked in Dutch factories, mothers cooked Dutch meals, and the children went to Dutch schools and played Dutch games. See the little cute little Dutch hats the girls are wearing? The Pilgrims stayed in Holland, and they stayed so long the children turned into Dutch children. There's nothing wrong with that. Even their own mothers could not understand them. I guess the children learned how to speak Dutch and forgot to speak English to their mothers. This was most upsetting. The fathers thought and thought and thought. They nearly wore their heads out thinking. One day, they heard of a brand new country, America by name. There's a globe, and he's pointing to America. There, they could build a town just like Scrooby. Yay! But America was far across the sea, and they had no boat. So the Pilgrims saved all their pennies and bought the Speedwell. Speedwell. Look, the sails have patches, and the holes were patched. Does that look like a good boat or an old boat? In the ship's hold, they stored barrels of grain and bags of beans and boxes of vegetables and bottles of jam and all their belongings. The boat got so crowded there was no room for a cow, so they filled tub after tub with golden butter. Cows, make butter out of cow's milk, you know. They're climbing up that ramp to go into the boat. They have those bags with beans in them. Let's see. Is that stork crying? Let's see. When all was ready, they sailed away, waving goodbye to Holland and their Dutch friends. The storks wept. Oh. I guess they loved their people. But alas, the Pilgrims had not gone far when the boat began to leak. Water poured in. Their feet got very wet. Back they hurried for another boat. Their new boat was bigger and better. Oh, good. It was called the Mayflower. That's a Mayflower, but that's not the boat. There's the Mayflower. Mayflower. That looks like a new boat. It looks better, doesn't it? Once more, they set sail for America. Yay! Uh-oh. Out on the big wide ocean, waves were high as mountains. The wind roared and roared. The Mayflower rocked and rolled and rocked and rolled. In fact, it was so rough, the sailors ordered the Pilgrims to remain below. One little boy disobeyed and climbed on the deck just as a giant wave hit the boat. Into the sea he fell. Oh no. But he was lucky as he was naughty. Seeing a rope from the ship floating in the water, he grabbed it and cried for help. Help! Strong sailors pulled him out. He was very wet. For days and days they sailed and sailed. The Pilgrims played all the games they knew. Can you guess what game these Pilgrims are playing? My guess is they're playing patty cake, baker's man. They even made up some new games. I wonder what new games they made up. What would you play? One dark night, way out in the middle of the ocean, a baby boy was born. They named him Oceanus. There. The very next night, another boy was born. He was named Peregrine. Their mothers were most surprised. I guess they didn't think they were going to have babies on the boat. Sailors, huh? Let's see. 63 days went by. The Pilgrims were discouraged. Sailor after sailor climbed the mast to look for land. All they ever saw was water. One morning, the smallest sailor on board was ordered to the lookout. He saw land! Yay! He was so excited, he nearly fell to the deck. While the Pilgrims, on hearing the news, threw their hats in the air and yelled for joy. Yay! No beautiful hills like those of Scrooby greeted the Pilgrims. Not a single house was in sight. Tall green pines and battered oaks lined the rocky shore. Anchoring the Mayflower, the Pilgrim Fathers set out on the lifeboat to see if this place would do for their new town. Mayflower Jr. It did not take them long to decide that with so much land in America, there must surely be something better than this. The next day was Monday. Pilgrim mothers loaded the lifeboat with tubs full of soiled clothing, their dirty clothes. There was no laundry on the Mayflower, so that whole day was spent washing clothes by the side of the sea. Ever since then, Monday has been wash day in America. Does your mommy do laundry on Monday? My grandma did. Day after day, they sailed along the coast looking for the very best place to settle. The weather grew colder and colder. The snow began to fall. Days were short and nights were long. It's snowing. Many times the Pilgrim Fathers went ashore, often remaining overnight. Once, just before daylight, they were awakened by loud shouts and shrieks of wild Indians. Maybe your mommy can tell you about Indians sometime. Arrows showered upon them. Whiz, whoosh, shoo, and Pilgrim guns answered back. Bang, 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 pew, pew. Look at those Indians, they're running away. The Indians left in a hurry. I wouldn't want to stick around and get shot either. After nearly a month had passed by, the Mayflower came into a beautiful harbor. Just what the Pilgrims wanted. Close to the shore, a big old rock seemed to welcome the Pilgrims with a smile. Look, it looks like he's smiling. A smile in his eyes. They named it Plymouth Rock. Plymouth Rock. I hear that Plymouth Rock is real. I know some people that have been there. Load after load of pilgrims left the Mayflower in the bouncing lifeboat. Out they climbed on Plymouth Rock and took a look around them. They saw a hill for their fort and cleared fields for their crops, trees for their houses, and a brook brimful of drinking water. Without waiting a day, the Pilgrims started to plan their town. There's a surveyor. Look, they cut the trees down. The first thing they did was to name it Plymouth. As it would take too long to build a whole village at once, they built one great big house where all could live. From morning till night, the fathers chopped and chopped. Mothers waxed paper for windows. There was not a piece of glass in Plymouth. Yeah, so they had to cover the holes in their walls with wax paper, and that was their window. The children cut rushes to thatch the roof. So those are the rushes, and there they're cutting them. And they put that up on the roof instead of like wood or tile. When it was finished, they moved in. There they are moving in. The men are bent over with heavy things on their backs, their furniture. Here they stayed the whole winter long. In the early spring, 19 Pilgrim fathers started their own log houses. They called the main street Leiden, where they named it Leiden after the town where they had lived in Holland. To this day, it has that name. It's an Indian. One day, the Pilgrim fathers were in the town hall. They heard the children scream. Picking up their guns, they ran to the door. There stood a painted Indian all by himself. Look, he has feathers in his hair. He was a very nice Indian. His name was Sadyebeth. Look, they're shaking hands. The Pilgrims liked him immensely. In very good English, he said, "Me come help 'em." Oh, he spoke with an accent. When he left, he promised to come again. See you later, bro. On the following Sunday, Sadyebeth brought 4 of his Indian friends to see the Pilgrims. They all stayed for dinner. 4? Let's count. 1, 2. And they have feathers in their hair, don't they? They're sitting at the table, having dinner. The Indians had such a good time, they wanted to bring their chief the next Sunday. This pleased the Pilgrims beyond words. Well, they liked each other. Look at that beautiful Indian chief. Look at his feathered headdress. Isn't it amazing? For Sadyebeth's chief was a powerful man. He ruled many tribes. His name was Massasoit. Some people say Massasoit. Not many days after this, Massasoit arrived with all of his tribe. He brought his peace pipe with him. And there's his peace pipe. They would put it in their mouth, and everyone smoked it. The Pilgrims and the Indians promised to be friends forever. When Massasoit and his braves went home, one Indian boy remained with the Pilgrims. His name was Squanto. Hi, Squanto. Ooh, look, a wigwam. Once his family had lived in a wigwam just where the Pilgrim Town Hall now stood. Squanto felt at home in Plymouth. He knew every path in the woods. He showed the Pilgrims how to trap wild animals, how to catch fish in snares, how to plant corn in hills. Squanto also taught them the Indian language. It's good. When everyone was nicely settled in Plymouth, the Mayflower sailed back across the sea to England. Not a single pilgrim was on board. The Pilgrims were still very, very good. Every Sunday they went to church in Plymouth, whether it rained or not. Evenings were quiet. There were no movies or radios in Plymouth. When fall came, the crops were harvested. The Pilgrims had twice as much food as they needed for winter. They didn't know what to do with it all. I know what they want to do with it. One of the Pilgrims suggested a Thanksgiving party. They would eat until their sides ached. Everyone agreed that this was a fine idea. So a wonderful feast was planned. Squanto carried an invitation to the Indians. They accepted with many thanks. The mothers baked pies and cakes and loaves of bread. That's an oven they're putting the bread in. The children dug for clams. The fathers went hunting, and they brought home turkeys and deer and rabbits. I bet the Indians did too. They did it better. Early Thursday morning, before the Pilgrims had eaten their breakfast, they were surprised by the wild shouts and yells of Indians. Since their guests had all arrived, the party started at once. Yay! Ever since Thanksgiving has come on Thursday. Big, long picnic tables were set beneath the trees. Everyone sat down and started to eat. One of the Indians brought popcorn for the children. He threw handfuls in the air. It says popcorn. The Pilgrims thought it was snowing. The feast lasted for 3 whole days, and such a feast it was. Oh, look, they all ate themselves sleepy. Of course, they took time out to sleep. Between meals, the Indians played games. The Pilgrim army drilled. Little girls spilled turkey gravy over their dress fronts, and little boys ate so much corn they were butter from ear to ear. When it was all over, the Indians gave 3 cheers for the Pilgrims. Never before had they eaten such wonderful food. On their way home, even Massasoit, chief of all the tribes, agreed that it had been the best party he had ever attended. Woo. The end. The Pilgrim's Party is one of the series of books written a generation ago by Sadyebeth and Anson Lowitz. It just talks about that book. So, that's all. I hope you enjoyed it, and you can watch this again and again. Happy Thanksgiving. The end.